Some of the most interesting programs we've done on our little corner have to do with historical segments of different organizations, businesses, municipalities here in the North Country. And it's something that Calvin and I cherish because we get to play these historical shows over and over again. For a long time, Calvin and I have been talking about trying to get inside the Plattsburgh Fire Department and check into its wonderful, colorful, long 100-year history. Guess what? We're here. Fire Station number 1, Cornelia Street in Plattsburgh, in December 2002, and we're going to have a great time today. First of all, Chief Jim Squires. How are you, Jim?
I'm fine.
Great to be with you. Brian Bayshore, who's studied the history of this department for so long. I'm sure he's had some long nights preparing for this show today, but we're just going to have a good time. Jim and I have been friends for many, many years. Jim, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Doing fine.
Thank you so much for inviting us here today.
We're very pleased to have you here, Gordy, and we're very pleased to have, this is so nice.
You know, part of your history is part of my history because as our viewers know, I was in the radio business for almost 36 years and spent a lot of time visiting this fire department, talking to your predecessors and you and to dispatchers, because my job was to gather news, and fires are news. We hate fires, but they're still news and people want to know about it. We spent a lot of time talking about fire safety and things over the years. And what our viewers may not know is that the fire dispatching used to happen right here in this building.
That's right. It was right in a small office here in the front, and actually was here since back in the 50s. When the county actually started doing that, and I think they only left this building back in '93, I believe. So they were here for a long, long time, and which was a nice thing because we knew the dispatchers very well, and it was very nice. We kind of missed them when they left the building, because it was different.
I bet you did, and just to let people know, the emergency preparedness businesses all moved out to the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. They got some pretty nice quarters out there.
Yes, they do. They do have some nice quarters. They have training facilities, and Jim King has done a tremendous job with building that to what it is today. I mean, the 911 system alone was a big project, but he's done a lot more than that. So, we can be really proud in this county of our 911 system and of our emergency preparedness. And we were really happy to be part of that because we're still happy thinking that they started right here, so it's great.
Well, a lot of things that started right here are now a model for the rest of the state and the United States. I remember when there was the threat of nuclear war way back when, the evacuation plans that they developed for Clinton County were some of the best in the nation. People were coming here and say, "How did you do that?"
That's right. That's true, and
defense,
we are still a model for a lot of counties in the state because for some reason or other, the people in this county work together, and that doesn't happen all over. And Jim King can attest to that. He's worked with the fire and EMS service in this county for years, and we've all worked together, and it's worked well, and it is noticed by other people. And it's amazing that when I go to other cities and I go to some of my chiefs meetings and I hear, how things are not working as well. They're not talking to each other. You're not doing things together, and I realize what we have here that is very valuable because we work together and we get along and we get more things done that way.
Just briefly, because we got a lot of ground to cover today, and who knows, we may have to come back again, as we discussed before we started the camera. Tell us just briefly about your own career in the fire business here.
Well, Gordy, I started as a firefighter in 1969. Things were a lot different then. When I started,
yeah, they were.
We only had one pumper with a cab on it. The rest of them were all open cabs, or the rest of the vehicles, except for the ambulance, of course. So I've been here for 34 years now, and so I've got a lot of happy memories of this department. Some not so happy, but that comes with the turf.
But things have grown so much. I remember those old days. I remember all the fire chiefs since 1961.
That's right. We've had several fire chiefs since then, and of course Jim Duffney and myself are the last two so far. So we'll see what happens down the line. But it's a good department, and we've come a long way as far as equipment and training and professionalism is concerned. Things are different today. We have a lot more rules and regulations to go by, and we've tried to work through all of those and do the best that we can, especially in EMS. We've expanded so much in EMS. The ambulance emergency business is very, very busy, and we're very proud that we've got a good cadre of advanced EMTs that provide what I think is probably some of the best care in the state, but I'm a little prejudiced.
And I don't blame you for that. You've worked very hard for what you have achieved here in this fire department. I guess we should start off by telling people that the Plattsburgh Fire Department, the firemen here are paid firemen. We've spent a lot of time dealing with the mutual aid system, mostly consisting of volunteer fire departments around the county, right?
That's right, yeah. All the departments in the county now, except Plattsburgh Fire Department, are volunteers. There used to be 2 career departments. One was on the base. But
That's true too, lest we forget.
Yeah, that's right. Since 1995, we lost them, and they were a very important aspect for us because, of course, having people on duty all the time, 24/7, like we do, they were available to us, and of course we were available to them for mutual aid on an instantaneous basis. So we do miss that aspect of it. But we do work very well with the volunteers. We offer mutual aid for them. They offer mutual aid for us, and they do a tremendous job, of course, out in the towns in the county. Without them, I don't know what would happen. But so it's interesting because we have to work with different types of departments.
And there's a great marriage between the city fire department and the mutual aid system all around Clinton County. It's way more complicated than we'll be getting into today.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll be able to cover all of those aspects of it because it just does work so well. And you mentioned the EMS system, just incredible.
Yes.
How advanced these advanced technicians on the ambulances have to be. In the old days, the firemen would jump on the ambulance and they'd take off. What a difference.
Yeah, I was one of those.
Were you really?
When I first started here, I started with an experienced fireman, of course, but our training was only in the first aid level. So
Sure.
I started on the ambulance, with what training I had. I had some from the earlier days in scouts and things like that. But we were basically a transport. We did the best that we could for people, but we didn't have the equipment or the experience or the knowledge like is happening today. So it's a tremendous change. It really is. I mean, the citizens are really well served as far as EMS in this county is concerned.
Now you still have 2 fire stations in town, right? This
Yes.
one here and the one down on.
Yes, 65 Cornelius Street where we are today, the main station, and then we have a second station on South Platt Street up in the south end of the city, just across the South Catherine Street Bridge. And we man that station with one engine company. And we have one engine company down here, our ambulance and our aerial ladder. And of course our main office is down here.
And boy, I remember the old days. When you mentioned the base, I remember hearing on all my scanners that there's an in-flight emergency on the flight line, and everybody would rush out and hither and thither. And it's different, I don't think we have as many chimney fires as we used to have in the old days. Remember, in the spring and the fall, some departments would have 30 chimney fires.
That's right.
In a weekend.
That's become a lot better too. Apparently, it's fire codes and people are more aware. Probably fewer people too are burning that type of burning wood and things like that. When I first came to work here, we used to have the burner fires, the potbelly oil stoves.
That too.
Sometimes those would really get going.
Yeah.
But no, things have changed a lot. The types of fire calls that you have change as the years, as people use different things and different fuels. We never had too many chimney fires in the city because, during my career at least, because most people had electric heat,
Sure.
which was nice. So, but then those systems get old too, so you have to. Sometimes you have problems with them too as they get older. So things keep happening.
Jim, you and I could talk for
Yes.
hours and hours, and someday we will. We thank you again for inviting us here. I was just thinking about Talking with Brian here, a lot of the history of Plattsburgh is hooked onto major fires down through the years. I can remember a number of major fires in the city of Plattsburgh since I began work in the radio business in 1961. But I've read all the history books. And when buildings were built of wood and fire departments didn't have the aerial ladders that they have and the equipment that they have to put out fires, our downtown area has been all but destroyed on numerous occasions back in the 1800s, right, Brian?
That is correct. We've had two major conflagrations back in the 1800s, losing all of downtown on both occasions. Actually, on one of them, we even lost the fire station downtown.
No kidding. I didn't even know that part of it. Really?
Yes. Plattsburgh mainly was contained around Bridge Street, Margaret Street, Trinity Park, in that area. That was a major portion of downtown, and both conflagrations consumed both areas, extending all the way out to Oak Street and all the way up to Brinkerhoff. So we've lost a lot of territory, and Plattsburgh has grown considerably over the years, but you look back in the early 1800s, downtown was a very populated area where the houses were very close together. So it's a lot different between now and then. If we lost downtown in that same area, it wouldn't be as severe. But back then, that was the hub. You had probably 5,000-6,000 people living in the city of Plattsburgh in the 1800s, compared to now you have 20,000 people.
Yeah, the population is relatively stable now, as we've learned from the last census. Now, in the summer of 2002, we're recording this in December of 2002, you celebrated an anniversary here, right?
That is correct. July 4th, 1902, the forefathers of our city in a common council meeting hired the first 12 firefighters for the city of Plattsburgh. Firefighters back then were hired and utilized to protect the city of Plattsburgh on a permanent basis. About that time, we eliminated most of the hose companies and volunteer companies and stuck with a paid company. We did have a small organization of call firemen that would be a backup for the paid firemen, and they would make the initial attack of the fire, and the call firemen would come in and help with the job.
So there were, actually before 1902, there were people fighting fires around here.
That is correct. Plattsburgh Fire Department was actually formed in 1817, and that was formed out of the village of Plattsburgh. And in 1816, the Republican, which is now partially the Press Republican, was the only paper in the area, and they advertised an article stating that it was the job of all able-bodied young men in the village of Plattsburgh to fight fire. In 1818, we formed the first volunteer fire company, but back then they had bucket brigades. And you would think a bucket would be a metal bucket to toss water upon the fire, but back then it was a leather bucket. They didn't use metal buckets. They were leather buckets used to
Seen them in
transport
museums.
water.
They're cool.
Yes. And you would line up two lines at the river, and they would pass the bucket down, fill it, and through the other line pass it up,
Unbelievable.
and then throw it up on the fire. And
No wonder buildings burned down.
Oh, yes. In 1818, we acquired our first piece of fire apparatus. It was a coffee grinder apparatus.
Oh, seen those too in museums, yeah.
Now, what would happen is you would fill the bucket, you would fill the tub on the apparatus with water from buckets. Then you would point the hose line to where you're going to go, and you had 6 to 8 firefighters pump it.
Pumping like crazy on both
Pumping
sides,
like crazy. That's correct. And
But it could shoot a pretty good stream.
Well,
also.
it shot out it went through a hose line about 5/8 of an inch, and it shot anywhere between 30 to 60 feet.
Isn't that amazing? You're talking almost 200 years ago now.
That is correct. Almost 200 years ago when they started. It was incredible to see the apparatus. I've done a lot of study, and I have not found that piece of apparatus yet. It's a 1790 hand pump, and I have checked over 20 different museums in the United States and around the world, and I still haven't found the exact same piece of equipment that we used back then.
No kidding.
No kidding.
I've been to a few fire. What young kid doesn't dream of being a fireman? And I can remember the growing up down around New York City to watch the fire trucks go out. There's a certain fascination and a glory, and before that, in the days you're talking about, it was teams of horses, right?
All right.
And the
correct.
harnesses were hanging, as I remember, and they'd come down on the horses and take off, towing the old
Well,
fire apparatus.
The funny part is horses didn't come into the fire service until 1850s and 1860s.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes,
Pull that thing
firefighters
by hand?
pulled everything they had by hand to the fire scene.
Man.
And in 1850s and 60s, actually, I think it was the city of Chicago started using fire horses.
Talk about fire history, huh? The Great Chicago
Oh,
Fire.
yes, big fires in Chicago. And they started to put teams of horses on there because the firefighters would get to the scene. They'd be exhausted from pulling the big, heavy
I can
equipment.
imagine they would be. Calvin and I would make it to the street. They'd have to dial 911.
And the average horse team was usually consisted of 2 horses. And in the snow, they would add a 3rd horse to the team to pull the apparatus through the snow. Now, the city of Plattsburgh didn't acquire its first team of horses till 1902. And then in
The year
1925,
the modern department formed, huh?
that is correct.
Wow.
And in 1925, we eliminated all the horses, and we stuck with just motorized apparatus.
Jim talks about open cab vehicles. I've interviewed a lot of old firefighters on the radio, because I live in Morrisonville, and they've got a rich history with their fire department there. And I talked with the old guys, fire districts were different back then.
Yes.
Morrisonville district I don't know if they went to Cumberland Head, but huge. And these guys would talk about 30 below zero, getting the old truck going and throwing the bunkers on and heading down the road with the wind and the snow hitting them in the face. Talk about heroism.
Oh, yes.
Holy mackerel.
Our firefighters here in the city of Plattsburgh, they actually rode tailgate till the end of the 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
Are you kidding me?
Sure.
I guess I remember that now.
Yeah, in the 80s, I guess we eliminated the tailboards.
Holding on for dear life,
Oh,
going
I
down
can
the
remember.
street, all those old movies and old photographs and
I
coats
remember
flying. And,
crossing Margaret Street or turning down on Margaret Street a lot of times and hanging onto the bar, and sometimes your feet would go out almost.
and saying to
But,
yourself, I could have done anything else with my career except hanging on to this big.
Then after a while, we got safety belts, and things got better. And then eventually, they came up with the closed cabs in the front, or at least partially closed cabs in the front, what they call jump seats, and got people off the tailboards where it was a little safer up front.
Yeah.
We put a seat belt on them, actually. So,
there are many
Things have
different
changed so
many
much.
different parts of the history of a fire company like yours. A lot of it has to do with people, and a lot of it has to do with equipment, and that's why I'm so interested to hear you talk about the old equipment.
Well, the funny part about the tailboards and the sideboards, they were formed at the same time the horses were running through, because the firefighters would run to the scene along with the horses, and they'd be exhausted. They'd get there, and they couldn't effectively fight the fire. So the inventors of the fire apparatus started to attach tailboards and sideboards to allow the firefighters to ride to the fire scene, so that way when they got off the truck, they were able to fight the fire.
Isn't that incredible? And you wonder, hearing about the Chicago fire and many other major fires and metropolises all over the country, you wonder how they could ever get a fire out with the equipment they had to work with 100 years ago.
Well, a lot of times in the history of firefighting, it was a very defensive firefighting. What they would do is sometimes they'd actually demolish buildings to prevent the fire from spreading any further. And that way
Makes
they
sense
could
now that I
contain
think
it
about it.
and stop the fire from spreading into areas they didn't want it to go.
I think that's where the term hook and ladder comes from, also, because they used hooks to pull down structures or partial structures that maybe had
See, who
partially
would
burned.
dream of that until you just said that? I never would make a...
And it's evolved so much, but it's evolved as the needs have changed, So It's so interesting.
Well, I can remember. I don't want to jump all around here, except that things hop into my mind, and my mind is very disjointed. But I remember when the high rises were built here, and the college dorms, and how we didn't have means to get to the top of these buildings right in the beginning, did we?
No, not really.
You know.
We had to use the stairwells and the stairways to get up to the top. Now, of course, we have a platform that can reach 102 feet, so that's as high as most of the buildings in the city here go. So,
I can remember when Butch O'Connell was fire chief. When the heck was that, Jim?
that was back in the late 60s, early
When they had the
70s.
first fire in the college dorms over there, and that was a totally new experience for Plattsburgh firefighters to fight
Yes.
fire in a
high-rise
dorm room way up high. And I can remember covering that, and there was just a little bit of confusion in the beginning, and ultimately the fire was out because, you know.
It's completely different because all the equipment that you're going to use has to be brought up to the fire floor or the floor below before you can start fighting the fire. If there are hose lines in the building, then you can use those hose lines, but you always need a lot of other equipment and extra hose lines and things of that nature. So it's quite it extends the amount of work and the amount of manpower that you need because you have to get that equipment up there.
I want to look around this building and see a lot of the historical stuff. I've never been inside Horican Hose building, but I understand you got some neat stuff up there.
Yes,
Brian.
Horicon Hose is one of the oldest firehouses, if not the oldest firehouse in all Clayton County.
No kidding.
It's one of the last standing structures, and it was acquired in the 70s by the Plattsburgh Firefighters Benevolent Association. And now we are going through the process of doing renovations in the upstairs. We have the downstairs filled with different memorabilia from the fire department. We actually even have a dispatch book from the early 1900s of fire calls and where they were going and what they were doing. We have two pieces of apparatus that are currently down there. We have the old chemical extinguishers that were utilized back in the early 1900s. So we have a lot of equipment that was used actively by the fire department here in the city of Plattsburgh, and we have people that come in and donate things all the time that they find in their garage or in their attic, or their father or great-grandfather was a firefighter and they had this piece of equipment laying around. And so it's very interesting, and we're always picking up new things here and there on the history of the fire department. We actually even have a game well system, which was pretty much the first pagers the county ever had. And they were a system that was hooked up into every firefighter's house. The earliest time they can remember is like 1913. It was installed prior to that, but when we're looking back at the history...
You gotta be kidding. They had that system in 1913?
Game well system was in 1913. It was hooked up and installed prior to 1913, but when we look back at the history, we can't find any information prior to that, but we knew by the manufacturer that the system was made before that.
And when I came to work here
amazing.
when I came to work here in 1969, it was still in service, or a game well system was still working.
You gotta be kidding.
Firefighters in the city had bells in their homes, and of course we had the call boxes all around the city. And when a call box would come in, and if it was a fire, a code would be stamped out on the game well machine, and it would ring a certain number of bells in each firefighter's home. Would tell them where the box alarm was coming in and to respond to the fire. So it was still in service back in the 60s.
Boy, have we come a long ways, baby, huh? Since those days?
Yes, we have.
That's
We've
incredible.
gone through several paging systems now throughout the county, to the modern day pagers that we use nowadays for firefighting.
It's amazing. Before we get up from this table, I want to mention 9/11 because it was such an important part in all of our lives, a huge thing, and the memories are still just as poignant now, a little over 1 year later than they were before. I can't even imagine what went through your minds as firefighters and executives in the business when you heard that happen, and you showed us. Calvin is probably taking a picture of a beautiful plaque that you were awarded after that. So that had to be
Yes.
quite a time for you, thinking about your
Yes, it was.
compatriots down there.
Yes, it was, Gordy. It was. I think my first reaction was disbelief. It was almost like it was a bad dream, but you knew down deep that it was reality. And when those, bad enough when the structures, when the aircraft hit the structures and the structures were burning, but when the structures actually collapsed, that was devastating. And because we knew that that building was filled with firefighters, both those buildings. So.
And tons of information is still being unraveled in terms of the structure of those buildings.
Yes.
How many seminars and conferences do you think will be held and have been held on what to do if that should happen again? Isn't it amazing? As much as you learn about firefighting, every fire is a little bit different from the other one, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. They're all different. It depends on so many different things: the type of structure, the type of building materials. For example, those high rises were a very unique type of structure. It was a new type of way of building a high rise, and we know now what the weaknesses were. But and of course we'll learn from that. But and that's been a part of the history of the fire service, is learning. Every time there's a fire or a bad disaster in this country, we have learned from it, and we've changed things. That's where the fire codes have come from, and a lot of our modern technology now has evolved because we learned from things that have happened to other people, to ourselves.
Jim, you got that plaque. Where did that plaque come from?
That plaque was donated by O'Neill Red and Drown Funeral Home. We had we were going to have our yearly, or 1 year after ceremony here because of the 911 disaster on 9/11, and they phoned me from the funeral home and said that they wanted to do something. So, well, we said, I said, whatever you want to do. They said, well, we're thinking of a plaque. So they presented that to us on 9/11, 2002.
Boy, that's great.
And it's so beautiful. I just couldn't believe that, whoever did it did such a nice job, and it's so appropriate.
How are you going to display it ultimately?
Well, we're planning on a permanent display in the front of the fire station here. We have our monument out there with the names of the firefighters in the department that are deceased, and of course our flag. And so we're planning on probably some type of a permanent display right out there, so that people on the street can stop and take a look at that. And it's part of the history of this country now.
Oh, boy. I guess it is. Indelible. Now, before we get up and move around, I just want to find out a little bit about you, Brian, and when you first started as a fireman.
I came on the job in February 1st, 1996. I've been here almost 7 years. I find it to be one of the most rewarding careers that anyone could ever want in their lifetime.
This is the pitch. I
Yeah.
love it.
I actually love coming to work. I get up in the morning, I get ready, and I just feel really good that I'm doing something for our community. And it's an outstanding career, and we have a saying around here: if God made a better job, He kept it for Himself.
Oh man. I'm sure nobody else has ever used that line either. How did you get interested in the history part of it?
About 5 years ago, we were discussing different things in the fire department. At the time, they were working on the wall for line of duty deaths for memorials for firefighters in New York State and in the National Memorial. And I started looking into whether we had any line of duty deaths. And prior to that, people really didn't discuss it. People didn't know. So I started to dig and get some information. And the chief here wrote a report on different information that he found in his career. And I took that, went down to City Hall. I've gone to the library at the college, gone through the archives, researching different parts of information, and found out there's a ton of history in firefighting here in the city of Plattsburgh.
Don't you wish that every department had a historian like this? And I know a lot of the big departments do, but it must be the most exciting thing for you to uncover new information each time.
Oh
'Cause
yeah,
we're so interested in history, Calvin and myself. That's great.
I find it incredible just when I find something new. It's kind of like I come to work. Hey guys, I heard this and this,
Of
and
course it is, yeah.
some of the guys around here. Oh no, here he goes again. But other guys around here are like, really, I didn't know that, and very informative. Since I've been doing this for 5 years, a lot of the guys know the history and what's going on now. They're more familiar. When we give our tours, people learn as I give them, and then they pass that on to the next guy. Or junior guys are more informed when they're hired on the job. Different things happen. Not only do I research the history for the fire department for the city of Plattsburgh, but firefighting in the whole United States and the world. I've gone over between when hoses were made to when pumps were made, and all the way through conflagrations and horses and fire poles, and a ton of information's out there to learn.
The average guy, John Q. Public, doesn't think about it, about that history and that background when he sees the fire truck come up and they put out his chimney fire or their kitchen fire and go home. But I mean, we know a little bit about it, having covered it on the news and Calvin doing interviews. But
Right.
I mean, I know for a fact that this city had wooden water lines at
Yes.
one point in its history, and I've seen a couple that
That's
they dug
right.
up.
That's
They
right.
had one on City Hall, outside City Hall for a while.
Absolutely right. So interesting, because it was just a few years, not too many years ago, that they uncovered some of the old wooden lines, and they were still intact. And that was the first water system that was after the buckets and the bucket brigades and pumping from the river. So they started out with wood poles that had holes drilled down through the center of them, and that's where the word fire plug came from, because they used to have plugs in those pipes.
Come
And when
on.
they needed-
now we're
when they needed
learning
water-
stuff again here.
They pulled the plug out and they put some kind of an insert in there so that they could tap the pipe and get water out of it to fight a fire. So that's where the fire hydrant term came from. Some people still do call them fire plugs.
Fire plugs?
Fire hydrants were actually made of wood in the first beginning of fire service.
Come
also,
on.
no wooden fire hydrants. I found that out probably about 6 or 7 weeks ago. I didn't know that information, and doing a lot of research, I found out that fire hydrants were first formed in wood, and then later on in the 1800s, they were made of steel.
Isn't that truly amazing?
It is amazing, considering how wood deteriorates with water, and they utilize them as hydrants. It's incredible the amount of work that they put into it.
The history of firefighting in this town has to be connected with the history of the water system itself, because you mentioned before you had to fill the tank with buckets when you first started, and once they got a citywide water system and hydrants installed, it made it a little bit easier to tap into that, right?
Oh, it made it much easier. In the early 1800s, the water system was actually a private industry. There was a gentleman that had the water rights for the city of Plattsburgh. Now, he wasn't allowed to monopolize the water rights. He was paid an earnest wage to take care of them, and he owned them. But later on, the city went ahead and they built what we have now, 2 ponds, reservoirs, and the current water system, and it costs them about $250,000 to do all that.
Wow. We're going to stop for just a moment, collect our thoughts, and continue this great history of the Plattsburgh Fire Department. Even though it was very comfortable at that table in the chief's office and the coffee was good, we decided to become mobile for a moment. Brian, we're in the front hallway. This area, at least formally, was very familiar to me. Before we start showing all these pictures, we were just talking about how many paid fire departments there are here in northern New York. Yours is the only one for quite a distance, isn't it?
Yes, we are the only paid department north of Glens Falls and east of Watertown.
Wow.
There are other departments, Saranac Lake, Lake Placid, Tupper Lake. They have paid drivers,
I see.
but the firefighting force is all volunteer after that. And then you have Malone, which they are call firemen. They are only paid during a fire.
I see. Okay. Now, let's talk about the platoon system. We've got pictures here.
Yes, you do. Plattsburgh Fire Department works on a 4-platoon system. A platoon is a force of 10 firefighters that work on shift. The shifts last 24 hours with 72 hours off. So you'll have a platoon come in. Today's platoon 3. We have 10 firefighters that are scheduled to work today. All 10 are here. On the average day, there are 8 firefighters here on the station. The city allows us to have a minimal of 8. If a platoon has less than 8 firefighters, we call in an additional firefighter, bring the manning back up to 8. That way we can operate 2 engines, an ambulance, and the truck. So these pictures here on the wall, our current firefighters that are here in the city of Plattsburgh now, we take our retired firefighters and we put them in our museum. Their pictures come off the wall and they get sent to the museum, and then they're honored there. Now, currently we're missing a few pictures because we have a couple probationary firefighters that have just come back from the academy, and they have not been able to have their pictures done at Blair and Weber yet.
What kind of schooling does a firefighter have to have before he can become a full-fledged firefighter here?
Well, it's a long, long process to become a paid firefighter. You have to take the civil service exam, usually have to score high, because in the last 5 years, firefighters with 90s and 95s and 100s have been hired. They've really stayed away from the 85 percentile of firefighting. Usually if you score below 80%, you're not even considered for the job.
No kidding.
No kidding. Then once you're through the testing part of it, you go currently on to a list for hiring, and then the city takes 1 out of every 3 candidates at the top of the list. Now, it's different with civil service. If we needed 2 firefighters, they would look at 5 firefighters on the list and they could pick any 2 of the 5. So what happens is all 5 firefighters would go through a physical and agility. Then they would go ahead and have a psychological evaluation, a background check, and sometimes, depending, they even do a credit report. It's very intense on making sure that the individual being hired is going to fit the job. Now, these firefighters, after being appointed by the Common Council in the city of Plattsburgh, they go ahead and they go to an academy. The academies last anywhere between 12 to 16 weeks, depending upon what training they're going to be doing.
Wow.
12-week academy will last if they're not doing any EMS training at all during the academy. It'll go up to 16 weeks if they are training to be an EMT and coming back as an EMT. Now, the bottom 16 guys in this department have to hold EMT cards.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Ah.
And with the change of contract now, you have to maintain an EMT card for 15 years in the department. We now have the ambulance in service with 2 critical care techs on board today that are just a step down from paramedics here in the city. The county really doesn't go with paramedics. It's a very intensive course, and we have no need for paramedics. All of our EMTs and critical care techs here in the county run under orders by the doctors already that are standing orders to push drugs and so on and so forth. So it's a very intense program. And paramedic stage is really left down into Glens Falls, Saratoga, Albany, that area, because of the training. It's just not capable up here for the hours. The volunteers in this county do an excellent job. They volunteer their time. We have some of the best EMTs throughout the New York State
sure
here. We really do. And our department is very proud to be critical care techs and very proud to serve our community in that aspect. I love that. There's days I love riding on the ambulance and meeting people and going over things, and it's just a need that's out there, and we absolutely want to fill that.
This is a pretty cool department. Now we have a plaque behind you. This plaque shows when the building was constructed.
That's right. 1949,
Oh,
this station was constructed. It wasn't moved into until 1950.
Ah.
It became actively and christened in 1950. to be the fire department here on Cornelia Street.
Oh, Councilman, you know, I recognize some of these names, of course, George Miller, Dan Ryan, Alan Light, the Corporation Counsel, one of the most famous of all in history, and general contractors, of course.
Right. Actually, the architect of this fire station has built our sister station in Glens Falls.
Oh, no kidding.
No kidding. But the sister station in Glens Falls has one additional bay on it. And this architect that had built this station had built hundreds, almost thousands of fire stations all across the United States. He was well known for building fire stations in that time frame.
And this fire station has undergone quite a few modifications over the years. First of all, Jim mentioned moving out the dispatching system to the air base, so that those rooms changed, but the bays have changed a little bit too over the years, haven't they?
That is correct. Actually, this station had 2 bays in the beginning. They actually built on the 3rd bay where the aerial apparatus was. Then, when they bought the aerial apparatus, it was too tall to fit in the building.
I remember very well.
So they had to tear up the floor and dig downward to make room for the aerial to back into the bay.
Isn't that amazing? That's a big piece of equipment.
Yes, and it's actually well used now in this department. A few years back, the aerial apparatus was an 8-man job, and this department had a 7-man manning clause through the city of Plattsburgh. So when you had a fire, you'd respond 2 pumpers and no aerial. Now the city has included, since 911, an 8th-man policy where the aerial apparatus will roll on all calls, which also helps out with the rating for the fire department's base for taxpayers and businesses. If you move up in your class of fire districts A, B, C, and D, the higher you go up, the cheaper the rating is for your insurance because the coverage is better for fire.
You can do a lot of things with an aerial truck that you can't do with other apparatus too.
Oh, the aerial truck is able to fight fire just like a pumper. It has less water, carries approximately 200 gallons of water on it, but it's got the ability to go 102 feet in the air and also has a platform which can push out 1,500 gallons of water per minute.
Think about that, folks.
Oh yes, 1,500 gallons of water is a lot of water to be pushing out a nozzle.
You know, we were thinking of, Jim mentioned Plattsburgh Air Force Base and the marriage between that fire department and this one while the base was here. But they had some massive equipment out there too.
Oh yes, they had a huge apparatus called Big Bertha.
Wasn't that amazing?
That was an amazing piece of equipment. I remember being a little boy and seeing a demonstration they put on there. They foamed a huge area in a matter of seconds. It was incredible the amount of water that big piece of apparatus could put out.
Seemed to me like one of their massive trucks was going down, helping maybe on mutual aid for a fire and tipped over on Cornelia Street. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that when that happened, but that could have been
It's
a
pretty
possibility.
hard. These things go bouncing down literally bouncing because they're so huge.
Yeah, and then you got to figure how much water's in those
Oh,
trucks.
yeah.
You got to consider that tank probably has 5,000, 10,000 gallons in it at 8 pounds per gallon. You're rolling around with 50,000 pounds of just water.
Whole different ball game.
Oh yes, it's a big different ball game. Considering if it's not quite full, the water's going to swish and pull wherever the vehicle's going to be turning, and it's going to be pushing that weight against the side. So I can see some of the apparatus actually tipping over from the water weight alone.
You know, just while we're standing here in this hallway, before I forget it, I want to mention Rescue Hose number 5 that's been around in this town for a long, long time, and I can remember their building on South Platt Street because we used to have the count the money for the muscular dystrophy street drives there years ago.
Right.
But they've been a big part of firefighting around here for a while, too.
Yes, Rescue Hose 5 is actually a co-company here in the city of Plattsburgh. They're actually a support company for the Plattsburgh Fire Department. And if you look at any type of literature that represents this department, you will notice that...
Sorry about that. Come on in. We're going to stop for just a moment. There you go. Yeah, we had to make way for the mailman there for a minute. Okay, we're talking about Rescue Hose.
Yes, Rescue Hose 5 was formed in 1895, and it was a support company for the City of Plattsburgh Fire Department. It is utilized nowadays as a cascade system lighting and manpower department. They're automatically mutual aided for any structure fire here in the City of Plattsburgh. And if you see in any literature that you read for fire departments in New York State, we are considered a combined company of Rescue Hose 5 and the City of Plattsburgh Fire Department.
Good bunch of people for a long time and great associations, and they've used that lighting and that cascade system on a lot of fires. What, for the people who are uninitiated, what's a cascade?
Cascade system is a bottle filling system. As you noticed with our SCBA self-contained breathing apparatus firefighters use to enter the building with, cascade system fills those bottles with fresh air, and Rescue Hose 5 is the only cascade system in Clayton County, and they fill the bottles for every department everywhere in Clayton County, even in Vermont when we have structure fires or when we cross the border up into Montreal. They actually respond and fill the bottles for those fires.
That's
also.
pretty essential thing, isn't it?
Oh, it's very essential. Rescue Hose 5 has helped out this community considerably in the history of firefighting since 1895.
Well, you talk about the history of firefighting. They didn't have oxygen bottles way back when, did they?
Well, actually, SCBA's were started prior to that in the 1800s.
Come on.
Nope, they were actually figuring out ways. Like the first firefighters grew beards, first real firefighters. And they would get to the fire scene, they would dip their beards in water, they would roll them up, put them in their mouth.
This is amazing.
And then they
This
would,
it sounds like a story, but it makes perfect sense when
Oh,
you...
yes, and they
I've
put
never
the
heard
beards
that
in their
one before,
mouths,
Brian.
and then off they'd go inside the structure to do what they had to do for the interior attack.
Breathe through the wet beard.
Breathe through the
Isn't
wet beard.
that incredible?
And then later on, and I will give you, if you want, a little bit of history
course
about
we do.
SCBAs and when they were first formed, and when we get to the museum, and you'll see some of the first stuff used here in the City of Plattsburgh by our firefighters.
That's great. Good stuff. Can we look around this building a little bit?
Yes, we can. I can take you around the building and show you the bays, show you the upstairs, actually give you a tour of where our firefighters currently sleep, live, and what we do on a regular workday.
All right, let's do that. We climbed the stairs and we're barely out of breath. I'm not sure we could pass the agility test today, but Brian, you were saying when you come to work, you come upstairs to get briefed early in the morning?
Correct. We arrive at work. Our duty day starts about 7 o'clock in the morning for firefighters, 6 o'clock in the morning for the officer. We come up here at 7 o'clock in the morning, we sit around the table, and the officer will inform us of what goes on for the workday, what we have planned, and we'll have breakfast together. We're just like a family. We sit here and we talk for our first hour, and he informs us of exactly what is expected of the workday, goes over any meetings that have happened in the last 3 days where we were not here, and goes over any information that is pertinent to the guys in the ambulance or on the truck.
You know, we walked into this room and I said, oh my goodness, I haven't been in this room in many years, but when I was here years ago, I sat in one of these chairs. They were doing a mock accident and a triage in downtown Plattsburgh during a big celebration. And somebody nominated me to become one of the accident victims in this mock accident. They had 2 wrecked cars, and they put the worst, grossest looking cuts and bandages and blood. And then we got in the ambulance and went down, and they put us in the cars. And then they, responded with the firefighters in the ambulance and so on, and brought us back up here. And it was frightening for me to be sitting in the car in that wreck thing and wondering what it would be like had it been real. But you have to do training like that, don't you?
Yes, training is very important in any business, and the fire service training is probably the most important thing a firefighter can use. When you become a firefighter, like we said earlier, you go 12 to 16 weeks away at an academy. But when you come back, you still have to do well over 200 hours of training a year, and it's diversified in different categories. You may have to do 4 hours of fire extinguisher training. You may have to do 2 hours of building codes, so on and so forth, but you have to have that training. And it's very important with the ambulance and the trucks. Car accidents are a big portion of the calls that we respond to.
Sure. I heard one call while we had the camera shut off, somebody had fallen on the ice and everybody was going out to check them out. This is the time of year when people do fall down.
Yeah, we have a lot of calls for fall injuries, especially when it gets below zero through the ice. And we have two excellent guys today on that ambulance that are out there protecting the citizens of the city of Plattsburgh.
It's amazing. All right. Where to next?
Next, we'll go look at our training room.
All right.
And, pretty much in this room is where we do our briefings, our meals. On the other side of the wall here is the kitchen where firefighters were here from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we all have to prepare our meals together. We eat together. We talk together. This is our home away from home. You got to figure a quarter of our life that we have currently
exactly
right now
right,
is right
yeah.
here at the fire station.
Yeah.
So you grow a close bond with the firefighters you have.
I bet you do.
And a very important part of it is sitting and eating together and talking. This platoon is, our captain, Dan LaPointe, is incredible. He makes sure we eat together, we talk together, we live together, we even play together. It's, it's a very big part of being brothers in the field of fire service.
Real camaraderie, as you can well imagine. All right, let's move along. All right, what room are we in now, Brian?
Well, pretty much you're in the TV room right now. This room has dual purposes. Sometimes we'll have a platoon meeting in here. Sometimes we will watch videotape and do a little training in here, depending upon what circumstances. If we have like a half dozen guys working, we'll utilize this room to do a videotape or train or do a little instruction. If we have more than half a dozen guys from our platoon on, we'll move over into the training room and we'll do our training over there, and I can show you that room after.
All right, we were talking about shifts. Now, Calvin was asking a question before we started the camera again. How does that work? You come in and work 8 hours? How does that work?
You come in at 7 o'clock in the morning. Your first hour is pretty much your briefing and your breakfast and going over things with the officer. And then you're working till 4 o'clock that afternoon. At 4 o'clock, you're allowed downtime if the workload is done. There's a lot of times we're working till 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, preparing for after a fire, other situations. A lot of our guys, we go to school currently to be EMTs, so usually after 4 o'clock a lot of the guys will sit down and they'll start to study, and they'll study to 6, 7 o'clock at night, in between having a meal and eating together approximately 5 in the evening. Then after you're done your studying and you're done your workload for the day, we got downtime where we can actually watch TV, talk, enjoy ourselves, and then at 11 o'clock at night we're allowed to turn in. You sleep, but you don't sleep comfortably here at the fire department. The ambulance will go out 3 or 4 times during the night, and the guys will respond to calls here in the city. You'll also have your fire calls. And I've been doing this for 7 years, and I don't think I've slept a full night since I've been here.
Really?
Oh yeah, there's days you come home exhausted. A lot of people, that broken up sleep tires you out more than actually
I bet you it
sleeping.
does. Yeah, I bet you it does. It's probably nice to get home in your own bed, isn't it?
Oh, it's very nice. There's mornings you have to sleep 2 or 3 hours just to recuperate from working
Yeah,
a 24-hour
I can
shift.
understand that. The stress of it is pretty interesting. Talk a little bit about some of these historical photographs you have here.
Well, some of these historical photographs have been fires for the city of Plattsburgh, and they've come out of the museum, and we've had a couple of them taken by third parties and that have brought them here. The bluer pictures are newer pictures that over the years have happened. As you can see, they're labeled with where the fires were and what's happened to them. The older pictures, a few of them I can recognize. Some of them were before my time here as a firefighter. But they are part of our history and what we love about the job.
I bet you that's an interesting part of it for you, is collecting the old pictures, huh?
Oh, the pictures are incredible. It's just what you see the firefighters wearing back then to now and what equipment they use compared then and now is outstanding in the differences, and you can see the modernization of the fire service over the years through the pictures.
You know, it's amazing for those of us who happen to look down the list of things for sale on eBay, how much some of the old firefighting equipment, you know, the old leather hats and the leather buckets that you mentioned, they're getting to be worth some bucks.
Oh, they are. Actually, last fall I went through and I found an old wooden distinguisher case And just the case alone was worth $216
No
without
kidding.
the extinguisher.
Oh.
So old firefighting equipment is big bucks nowadays. But we're very fortunate that people actually donate some of the firefighting equipment they find in their basements and attics and storage places and garages. And it has helped build our museum up.
You know, I want to stop for just a moment and talk about how hard it is to get people in your own department, in the city, in the area, to be interested in the history of this fire department. And I remember all those struggles that started back in the 70s to keep that museum going and to keep people interested in adding stuff to that museum. It doesn't just happen automatically.
No. There was a Captain Ed Lacey who passed
Oh,
away
yes.
just recently. He has been a major factor in the museum. He's also been a major factor in the restoration of 2 pieces of apparatus that we currently have that have been used in the 1930s for the city of Plattsburgh. And he has brought tons of pictures and equipment and so on and so forth to make the department history move forward for us and being able to share that with other people thanks to him.
That's great. I'm just looking at that great photograph in the middle of that fire truck from Nyack, where my mother graduated from high school and in the teens, back in the 19s. That, you know, she lived there long before that fire truck came along, but I'm very familiar with that area. What a great looking truck, huh?
Yeah, it's a little similar to what we have in apparatus, but we're very proud of the heritage of the equipment that has been used through the city and through the United States. I mean, fire engines were originally built in England. In colonial times, most apparatuses were shipped over from England to the United States to be utilized. And it took a while for Americans to start building their own apparatus and making fire pumps. And now we make some of the best pieces of equipment in the world.
And they cost the bucks, too.
Oh, yes. A modern day pumper, like downstairs, run anywhere between $250,000 to $300,000.
That's amazing.
While an aerial truck will run about $750,000 for an aerial apparatus. An ambulance today, the ones we have, 286 is a heavy-duty chassis, runs close to $120,000 for a piece of apparatus.
Think about that, because those people who have followed my radio career and now working with Calvin on our little corner know that we ran street drives to raise money for city ambulances way back when. And if we could raise $40,000, $45,000, they could buy a pretty nice ambulance.
Yeah, and that
Think about it.
they had a street drive by one of the organizations in 1952 to purchase an ambulance for the city of Plattsburgh, and that was pretty much one of the most modern ambulances of today. It kind of looks like the Ghostbuster vehicle that you would see on TV. We actually have in our museum the oldest ambulance in the county. It's a 1934 Dodge, open cab, open back.
Oh, you gotta love it. I can't wait to see
It was used as an ambulance, chief's car, and other purposes, towed a ladder truck and stuff like that in the 30s and 40s. It has a lot of versatility to it, and we're still having it run today. We use it in parades
Do you really?
and take it out for shows, and you know, we're very proud of the equipment. But then again, Captain Ed Lacey was the main contributing factor to having those pieces of
I'm glad you
apparatus today.
mentioned his name, because he was a very special guy.
Yes, he was. He was an incredible man that had a lot of history, knowledge of history, and he was very proud of this department and the history of firefighting in general.
That's great. All right, let's move along. Don't ever get me involved. This isn't a challenge like they have on Channel 5. We got the famous fire pole here. Calvin says, yeah, Gordy's going to go down. I said, can you picture the lump there would be down there and what they would have to do to try to retrieve me after I hit the bottom? I didn't think fire stations still have fire poles. That is so cool.
Oh yes, we're very proud of our fire poles. And firehouses all across the United States, they're taking fire poles out
Yeah.
because of the danger if you're not properly using them. Firefighters here, when they come on the job, they're giving an hour class on how to properly use a fire pole. They're made to polish the pole and they're taught how to respect the pole. And pretty much,
I would respect it by standing way, way back from it, yeah.
yeah, you've got about a 18, 20-foot drop when you're sliding down. And if you don't use the pole properly, you can sprain an ankle, twist a knee. You know, I've seen,
Burn the skin off your arms and legs.
yep, off the hands.
Yeah.
Poles are polished here every other day. There's a schedule for polishing them. You can't polish them too much because of the material. It's made of brass. And about every other day we polish them. Junior firefighter's job. Most junior guy upstairs will go ahead and he'll polish the poles, get them all set, and they look really nice when they're done. Like this morning, they went through and they polished the poles, so it doesn't look too bad right now. But by the end of the second day, you'll have marks on there from the grease on your fingers. And fire poles have a very interesting history. They were actually formed in Chicago. David B. Kenyon was his name, was the firefighter who formed it.
Move out of the way. Yeah, I'm not going to step in the hole, no. You aren't going to get that classy deal. David B. Kenyon?
David B. Kenyon was the firefighter who came up with the fire pole. He was out of Engine Company 21 in Chicago. And they were utilizing the stairs all the time to get to the horses. So what would happen is he'd take about 10 to 15 seconds to go down the stairs and get there. He come up with the idea of a pole that would take about 6 seconds. So the average pole use is now about 6 seconds, they say, is slide from top to bottom and be jumping in your gear. Now, response time here in the city of Plattsburgh, we're very proud that within 30 seconds our pumpers are pulling out the door. From the
Come on, 30 seconds?
30 seconds from the tone. You'll slide down the pole, which takes about 6 seconds. It takes you probably about 20 seconds to get in your gear, 4 seconds to get on the truck, and the driver's pulling out.
That is amazing to me. 30 seconds is a half a minute, and that's not very long.
Correct.
It takes me way longer than that to get both feet on the floor in the morning.
Yes, our firefighters.
Another 4 or 5 minutes to find the John in the dark.
We can be anywhere in the city of Plattsburgh in approximately 3 minutes between both stations. We can be at any point in the city, out to the beach, all the way to the south end of town and to the housing projects in 3 minutes. So we've got a really good response time here in the city.
Obviously, the quicker you get there, the better job you can do to attack that fire.
Well, we've been very fortunate, especially lately. Our call time has been so quick that the fires, even in the history, have been very minor. We have over 800 fire calls a year, and I would say 25% of them could fall under complete structure fires. But because of the quick response time, we're able to knock down what would be a small trash fire compared to 5 minutes later could be a complete kitchen or a living room.
Doesn't take long, does it?
It doesn't take long. When I came on the job, I saw a trailer fire that escalated, and I was off duty at the time, to a complete, fully involved fire in less than 4 minutes.
Wow.
It traveled right straight through the residence in less than 4 minutes. So you've got to be really thinking about protection when you're doing that and going to the fire scene. A 3-minute response time is excellent for us from the start.
You know, we talk about some of the major fires, and I've obviously covered many of them live on the radio over the years. But I've also read a lot about the history of fires, as I know you have, and memorized a lot of it. But some structures get going, including all those wooden structures in downtown Plattsburgh. That kind of a conflagration can go right through an area in just a very short time. And I was thinking about, we did a program on the history of the college, and that mammoth fire that they had at what we now call Hawkins Hall. And I've read reports from that time period, and that burned really, really fast.
Yeah, fires and the structures and the equipment used for those fires, compared today is obsolete because building structures are built a lot differently. Back then, the wood was very fragile. It was like kindling. It burned quickly and hot, and before you knew it, fire was completely involved and there was no chance of saving it. Like our conflagrations downtown in 1849 and 1871, 1859 and 1871, completely destroyed downtown because of the wood structures, the framing. today's structures today have firewalls. Back then, there was no such thing. I mean, modernization of building codes has gone up considerably. So it is incredible in fires like that have happened where they've burned rather quickly. Within 20 minutes, you have the house completely gone. Even in today's structures on the older homes, you have a lot of fires that burn quickly. Recently, we had a fire on Cumberland Avenue, which is one of the historical buildings.
See, they're restoring it now.
They're restoring it now. I was first in on that, and that fire had structures built inside of structures, plus it had vacant spaces. We had 2 roofs to go through, so you had about a 3-inch.
So yeah, it was a mess over there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. You had 2 roofs, and there were about 3 inches between them. So the fire was allowed to travel through the roofs. So you were chasing fire from the beginning because of the old frame structure of the building. It had a lot of cocklofts and a lot of little spaces where it could hide. So throughout the whole structure, you were chasing fire constantly. On today's modern structure, that would have been a quick knockdown. You wouldn't have 2 roofs and all the other stuff under the building codes that we have now compared back then.
No, we have ways to detect fire fairly early now. I can remember when the modern smoke detectors first came into use, and trying to get it on the books so that under law, certain rental apartments would have to have working smoke detectors. And smoke detectors have helped a great deal if we can only convince people not to cut the wires and take the batteries out.
Yeah, a lot of people find them very annoying when they're burning something on the stove and it starts to screech, or if they have something going on in the house, like sometimes powders will set them off. But the safety of a smoke detector is well known in today. It's incredible the amount of lives they have saved. I've gone on to buildings and fighting fire where smoke detectors are still screeching, half melted, but they're still going off and sounding the alarm that there's something wrong. And because of that smoke detector, people have said, I didn't hear anything, and then I heard the smoke detector, and I got out my window, and next thing I know, the whole house is gone.
And I've seen some reports lately on television how it's kids don't wake up with smoke detectors as much as adults do, so the adults have the responsibility of getting the kids out. Small kids are so trusting and they sleep so soundly, they don't hear the smoke detectors, and there's nothing more tragic than losing a life in a fire, especially if it's a young life. Huh?
Oh yeah, as a firefighter, we're here to protect the people and save, and it's all part of the job, and we absolutely love doing that. But the most horrible thing is to lose somebody's life in a fire, and it's a big tragedy, especially if there weren't smoke detectors or any way of having an alarm for the child. People just got to remember, you got to keep the batteries in. You got to make sure that the smoke detectors are changed twice a year. When you turn the clocks back and when you turn them ahead, you need to change the batteries also in those detectors.
Absolutely. Well, the whole idea is to save lives. This is a kind of a training room, you said?
Yes, this is our classroom. Like in any other type of business, fire service constantly changes. So firefighters have to learn how to adapt to the new changes. We're in this training room quite a bit, especially in the afternoon. If there's nothing on the schedule for actually drills for us, we go ahead and we start classroom work. We'll watch videotapes. The assistant chief will come up here and instruct us on the board on fire safety, where we're going to put our apparatus when we do a building inspection. We go ahead and we familiarize ourselves with a lot of buildings here in the city of Plattsburgh, and we design fire plans for attacking these buildings if they have problems. The assistant chief goes over the plan with us and then points out where he wants the apparatus staged for each station. And when you arrive on scene, you'll know ahead of time where he has everything appointed. You'll know where the hydrants are. You'll know what the game plan's going to be and how you're going to attack it.
Yeah, you don't want to be having to make a game plan once the fire starts. You want to know ahead of time what you're going to do.
Oh, definitely. It's called organized chaos. People look around and
story of my life.
They see firefighters running all over the place, figuring out what needs to be done. People are like, oh, why is he running over there? Why is he running over here? They're running to these places for a reason. They know what they got to have. They know what they got to get. When you arrive on scene and you start flaking the line off the truck, you're probably preparing yourself in the first minute for an attack into the building that could last anywhere between 5 minutes to 5 hours. And that initial minute of disorganization, when you look into it, is complete organization by the fire department, because each guy, when he arrives on scene, knows what his job is and knows what he has to do to make the attack effective.
All right, let's continue our tour.
Well, also, this room was used for hazmat.
Ah, yes.
City of Plattsburgh.
Hazardous materials.
Exactly. City of Plattsburgh is now the hazardous materials handler for the county. We're going to be the hazmat team going in any situation. A truck dumps over on 87, we're going to respond
Could happen anytime.
anytime. So throughout all Clinton County, we are the hazmat technicians that will enter the scene and secure it, whether it's a weapons of mass destruction or whether it's just sodium chloride that's jumped all over the highway. We will stop the leak, plug it up, do what we have to do, keep the citizens away. Then the other departments in the county will be our cleanup details. What they'll do is they will decontaminate our team once we come out of the hazmat incident.
It's kind of an insecure world that we live in, and there are a lot of new things to think about over the last couple of years, aren't they? With germ warfare and who knows what all.
Oh yes, we look at things like that now, anthrax, smallpox, different things like that. We've gone over some extensive training in weapons of mass destruction to know what to look for, what symptoms, how to handle it. Anthrax was a huge scare prior to 911, was post 911, and we found out ways how to handle it. A lot of people were in the dark about anthrax. If you don't touch it, you really don't have to worry about it unless it's an airborne portion of it. And of course, with the equipment that we have, we can send a team in, completely clean the area, take out whatever we need to take out, the letter, any other objects that have been contaminated, secure it, give it to the police, and send it to an FBI lab. Through our training, we've learned all that.
That's wonderful. All right, let's move along.
Let's move along.
Okay, we're in a dorm room now, obviously.
Yep, this is the dorm. Firefighters here at 11 o'clock at night, we're allowed to turn in and sleep. So this is pretty much our sleeping quarters for the firefighters that are on duty. You will have your pumper driver, your tailgates, all the other firefighters on duty that sleep in here. Also utilize beds are assigned by seniority. The guy with the most seniority will come in here and he'll pick his bed, and then the next guy and the next guy and the next guy.
Sense.
Usually the two beds closest to the pole are the ambulance guys. That way they can immediately get to the pole and slide down. As you can see in this room, they have the pole like the other room. We keep a red light over top of both poles because this room is completely dark except for that red light at night. When the old dispatch used to be here, there used to be a center light, and when the call would come in, they would flick that light on. They'd flick it twice, then flick it on, tone you, and then you were able to see what you were doing. Today, you're getting up in the dark, you just familiarize yourself where your equipment are. Like by the trucks, when you come to bed, you put your boots by the bed. You jump up into your boots, get into your gear, down the pole, put your jacket on, out the door. 30 seconds later, you're on scene. Yeah, you're at 30 seconds, you're out the door, and 3 minutes later, you're on scene doing what you have to do to...
You know, before we started the camera this time, you were talking about some close calls and how sometimes you just get lucky. Now, you mentioned a guy who was with a plant that was glowing. I mean, these stories you're telling me, Brian, you didn't just invent those for this occasion, right?
A couple shifts ago, we were called to a house on Prospect Avenue. Somebody outside smelt a slight trace of smoke. We arrived on scene, had to break the door down. We got into the apartment and could see a slight haze throughout the house. So we brought the thermal imager in and we checked the radiators, baseboards. We checked the outlets. We checked every place we could think of where there would be fire. Couldn't find anything, but we could still smell the haze, and we're looking everywhere. Then one of the guys did a complete sweep of the room, and there over in the corner was this plant glowing orange.
This boggles my mind. A plant glowing, the alien plant. Actually, you said it had
The peat moss.
spontaneously.
The peat moss in the plant would spontaneously combust. It's happened before. After reading several articles in the last few years of this happening, it kind of, in the fire service, you kind of get to know what you're looking for. And it was a little bit of a shock to us when you see an orange glowing plant, but then once you recognize it, you're like, yeah, I remember reading that this happens.
And if you hadn't found it and it had, cleared the smoke and walked out, it's possible that could have burst into flames, I guess.
Definitely possible. It would have probably trailed up the curtain and into the rug, and 10 minutes later we could have had a complete structure fire from that little tiny plant that you wouldn't even think, that's so innocent.
And we mentioned another occasion where a guy just happened to go down cellar a second time for something, and there was an outlet.
Correct. A gentleman in his house went downstairs getting ready to go to work, took care of something, went back upstairs. A couple minutes later, he forgot something. As he was leaving, went back downstairs and started seeing smoke, turned around the corner. There was an outlet with fire going up the wall. So by chance of him just going down that second time because he forgot something, got us there. In 2.5 minutes, we had the area contained, powder going, and disconnected the electricity, and he was able to feel safe when he left to go to work that afternoon.
This something that I think bears repeating over and over again. As a crime victims advocate in the probation department, before, during, and after 9/11, one of my great lessons for people is to pay attention to what's going on around you. After 9/11, that was driven home to all of us. Pay attention to who's standing next to you. Pay attention to what doesn't smell right in your house. Pay attention, and you can save your lives, the lives of your family, and all your property if you just pay attention.
That's very important to do that, especially around the holidays now with Christmas trees and so on and so forth. A little bit of fire safety, a little bit of education. Don't overload your outlets. Lead cords are great, but if you're plugging too many things into them, then they're not so great. And something I learned in the military, pay attention to detail. Everything that happens around you, you need to observe, because it takes only one little mistake to create a dangerous situation for you.
I can remember, 40 years ago on the radio chiding people not to throw the Christmas wrappings in the fireplace or the wood stove, because that quick heat can start a chimney fire.
A lot of creosote is in the chimneys, and those little pieces of paper will go right up the flume and ignite onto the chimney, and you'll have a chimney fire before you know it.
We'll do our best. Maybe we've given people a few lessons today that'll help save property and lives. All right, what's next?
What's next? We'll go down to the bay, and you can have a tour down there, and then once we're done with the downstairs, we'll head over to the museum.
Gather around, kids. We're going to see some fire trucks.
All right, give it 1 minute, Jason.
Oh, yeah, he's going to come down the pole. We were just talking about what it's like if you wake up in the middle of the night and your arm's asleep or your foot's asleep.
There's been times where when you come down the pole, you'll have an arm asleep. You'll have to sling it around the other and slide down. It becomes very interesting on what you're going to do.
How did that open? Did that open on its own, or how does that?
It's got actually a levered. When you pull on the pole, you have a lever, and as the lever goes, it opens the doors, and then you slide down. The pole has all the pressure is in the pole, which pulls up on the top.
I love it. All right, let him come.
All right, Jason, come on down.
Oh man, there's no blood flowing anywhere.
Nope.
No serious burns. How many times have you done that, Jason?
Oh, plenty of times. In the middle of the night, especially.
I don't know how you do it. No wonder you're tired when you finish your shift. You must be exhausted. When you're cranked up, you have to think, now, I don't want to break both of these legs, because I need at least one to go to the fire,
Oh, exactly.
What's your last name, Jason?
Lacey?
Thanks so much for doing that.
Oh, no problem.
That was so cool. I could just picture what would happen with almost 300 pounds of me coming down that pole.
On this shift, Jason Lacey is what we call a legacy in the fire department. Chris Williams also. Both of their fathers were firefighters here. Captain Williams.
Of course.
Captain Williams still currently is a firefighter, so it's passed down from father to son. Jason Lacey, whose father restored our antique vehicles in the museum, has also now been on the department. Todd Ailey, another father to son generation.
Isn't that neat when that happens?
Oh, it's incredible to see that these fathers who have served our community in a great way, and now their sons have stepped up and become members of the fire department, and we're very proud of that. In New York City, it's a big tradition for a father's son to become a firefighter, and a lot of times firefight in the same firehouse as his father did.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. That's what you call heritage, huh?
Heritage and tradition. Firefighting is big-time tradition. Most of the stuff we do has been passed down from generation to generation.
That's absolutely cool. Let's talk a little bit about equipment here.
Equipment here. Our fire department currently has 3 pumpers, an aerial apparatus, and 3 ambulances. The apparatus right here is engine 283. It's a 2000 Pierce pumper. It's by all means one of the best pieces of equipment in the county. Pierce up here is a big name for firefighting apparatus. The department purchased this one replacing engine 281, which was a telescopic apparatus in the year 2000. We're hoping to order another truck to replace our 1991 pumper, which we now have at the base in one of the backup buildings. Apparatus for firefighting should be in service for approximately 15 years, and then it needs to be replaced according to manufacturers. There's a lot of different things you have to remember. These trucks carry the water, and after 15 years of service, there can be dysfunctions. How many cars do you see on the road currently that are there for 15 years? Not many. Most cars last about 10 years, and then you start to see them really fall apart. And these apparatuses are kept in good shape. We have them serviced half a dozen times a year, plus the manufacturer comes up and sends their crew to look at little problems that we have. So this is similar to the truck at Station 2, but this has got a taller cab, and the doors are mounted in different places, and the equipment is different. Station 2's pumper is designed for car accidents, for rescue, other problems in the city. This piece of equipment is mainly used for firefighting. And this is the frontline pumper, the first pumper in the department.
Okay, next.
Next on the other side of the pumper is 286, which is our ambulance here in the city of Plattsburgh. It's on a heavy-duty medium chassis. This was bought in also 2000. This piece of equipment is used by our EMS service today. It's great. It does a great job compared to the old Ford ambulance we had before we had so many problems with, and the GMC before that. This ambulance here has been in service, and we have not had any problems with her. She's run perfect, and she is really what you need. If you notice this size of an ambulance in Montreal and the bigger cities, they've gone to the medium chassis, heavy-duty ambulances.
Let's talk about numbers. You mentioned 283, 286, 280. How did that number thing started, and how long? As far as I know, the city ambulance has been called 286 for a long time, right?
Yeah, 286, 287 are the designated ones for the city ambulance. This year we put a third ambulance in service, 281, 286, 287. So ambulances are a big portion of our fire department. Now the numbers came through dispatch when they went ahead and went with the 911 system, and they started to control all the departments in the county. Instead of saying Plattsburgh Fire Department responding, the county through dispatch wanted to make it a lot easier. So they assigned each county a number. Like Cumberland Head Fire Department, their number is 18. Now all their apparatus, their chief will be 180. Their frontline pumper will probably be 181, 182, 183. And here in this department, 280 is our chief. So our apparatus follow is 281. That's our backup ambulance, 282, 283, 284. 282 is a pumper, 283 is our frontline pumper here, 284 is our frontline pumper, Station 2. So the numbers conglomerate within that 28 range from 280 to 289 for a designation.
It's great, and everybody's got their own numbers, and when I was in the radio business, I knew when they call out a certain number, I knew what department was going, and it helped me out too.
Oh, yes,
you learn all the
definitely.
codes and the nomenclature. There's a different lingo for almost every job in the world, and the fire service is no different. You have your own codes and own numbers. And
Oh yeah, the fire service has a lot of different information out there that people don't understand. It's a firefighter can sit there and talk lingo for hours,
oh, sure.
and somebody wouldn't have a clue what they're talking about. Just like if I was to go to a lawyer's office and talk to a lawyer, he'd spew stuff for hours and I'd be lost. And the fire service is the same exact way. But we kind of use that lingo. We let people know what we're talking about and what's happening. Like, this is an engine. A lot of people see a fire truck, they call it a fire truck. It's really a fire engine. The big aerial apparatus, an engine. Now in New York City, where our officers go and train, you have engines and you have truckies. Guys on engines do the initial attack. Truckies do the rescue and the ventilation.
Ah, see that? All kinds of new stuff. What else have you got?
Well, on the other side of the ambulance over here, we'll move over and we'll look at the aerial apparatus, which is a 102-foot aerial cat ladder, which was made in 1991. The piece of apparatus is now about 11 years old. We had it inspected last year, and we have it yearly inspected to make sure that it's in good condition. And this apparatus has passed everything, and it actually looks pretty good for being 11 years old.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness, look at this. Now, how many aerial trucks, aerial apparatuses do you have in Clinton County? Is District 3 has one, right?
District 3 has one. If I'm not mistaken, Ross's Point's got one, and we have one. I'm not sure if any other departments have it. And under the mutual aid system, this truck is going out. Like currently today, District 3's aerial apparatus is out of service. It's being serviced downstate. So we're covering District 3's district on the mutual aid system with our apparatus. So if they have a structure fire today, we will respond with the aerial.
You weren't kidding when you said you had to go down with the floor. Calvin, take a look at this. How you had to go down, what, about 8 inches? Or
Yeah, it's close to a foot in depth.
the clearances aren't too great here. This barely makes it. Somebody did some measuring.
Oh yeah, this apparatus, it was definitely a large piece of equipment, and the children absolutely love it. This is a truck that's a very hands-on vehicle, and we take it wherever we can show it off. It's absolutely a great apparatus, and I'm very very partial to it because I drive it.
Do you really?
Yes, I do.
Look at the hydraulics here. Huge, monstrous hydraulics to
Oh
raise
yes. The ladder with the platform takes a while to set it up, but within 7 or 8 minutes we'll have it fully extended up and able to do the rescue.
All right, let's take a walk toward the back and take a look at it. Now, this isn't one of those vehicles that requires somebody steering in the back end. does it?
No, this is a unibody.
Okay.
And what happens is it's one driver can handle this vehicle and go through and do what he's got to do. Inside the doors in the back here are ladders. Like with any ladder truck, you'll have your base for all your ladders, pike poles, and this truck right here will respond. And if we need anything that's bigger than your normal ladders on a pumper that are more than 24 feet or 36 or a roof, we'll go ahead and we'll get into the aerial apparatus and take what we need from here.
We've seen movies and in person some of the larger articulated trucks that they use in cities that you have to steer separately.
You have to steer separately. A lot of those trucks were designed for cities that have very small and narrow streets.
That's true. I never thought of that. Yeah.
And these apparatuses can be brought down small streets. This truck, fortunately, is able to go through just about any street in the city of Plattsburgh with little correction. Once in a while you got to back up on a little corner here or there, but pretty much we can reach any street, anywhere, by one route or another. If we know the street, we have actually a set place where we're going to enter and do the firefighting from.
You have to be aware of overhead lines and a lot of things, right, when you're fighting fire?
Oh yes, like in the ice storm, this truck went out for the first couple hours. At one point we had to pull this piece of equipment out of service because of the lines that were down and across the road.
Yeah. You have to be aware of so many things when you're going to fight a fire. That's why you have these practice runs ahead of time and all these scenarios that you lay out. You got to know where everything is before you get there.
Oh, you do. It's important, like in firefighting, that we know where the hydrants are. We know where we're going to station our trucks. We know what's going on in that building, whether it's a commercial or whether it's residential. we know what plan of attack we're going to be going ahead, and that's what our classroom's for. We sit there and we go over what we're going to do, and the officer reminds us. A lot of responsibility, and our officers here are excellent officers. I mean, they get their training in New York City. They're gone away for a month in Flip School down there, which is a frontline officer school, and they come back and they, in turn, give us some of that training back that they've learned. So it's a very intensive department when it comes to knowing what we need to do.
Now, something we haven't mentioned here in this program so far is that you belong to a union.
Yes, Plattsburgh Firefighters Local 2421, which is part of the IAFF, International Association of Firefighters. There are hundreds of thousands of brothers that belong to this union throughout the United States and the world. It's one of the largest firefighter unions out there. And New York City's one of our brothers, as well as Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, Troy, Schenectady, any large city, Glens Falls, Saratoga, Watertown, anywhere you can think of, Ogdensburg, all these major cities that are the size of Plattsburgh or bigger are members of the IAFF.
You know, I'm so glad we got an opportunity to come here, and I want to tell our viewers that this will be chapter 1. We had great intentions of going to the museum today. We had great intentions of going to Fire Station number 2 on South Platte Street. And our sincerest apologies to the guys who spruced up that station for our arrival today. But they'll get a chance to do it again, won't
Oh,
they?
yeah, we will. They'll definitely get a chance to do that again. But before we close, we'll look at the front of the truck where the bucket is, so everybody can.
I don't want to miss
have a
anything
chance
before we
to,
leave here today.
To do that. But our guys are well prepared that for the next part, we'll go through Station 2 and we'll go through Horicon Hose, which is a museum, and the Union Hall that we have over there. And it'll give us time to take care of those little bit of renovations that we're still currently doing.
Well, the best thing is our little corner is one of those things where we, as we told you from the beginning, we love to fly by the seat of our pants. If you lay it all out ahead of time, you know what they say about the best laid plans. We like to just do it and go with the flow, and look at what an interesting program this has been today. If I'm excited by what I've learned from you, Brian, and from the chief and others here, I can imagine what the people young and old who are watching this program must think about it. Because it's like the judicial system that I have to explain to victims every day. Until you have need for a fire service or an ambulance, you really don't think about how it works. So it's really great to get the story from the inside out, not only how the fire department works today, but how it's worked for the last 100 and some years. I think it's great.
Yeah, and I think it's wonderful that we can share this with our community and let them know what goes on here in the fire department. And we're always open to people stopping by, you know, and looking at and seeing what's going on. We have no problem doing that. We're here for our community. And as for other departments here in our county, you know, this fire department's ready to help and respond to any major incident, minor incident that they need help with. You know, the mutual aid system's out there. Give us a call. We'll be right there to give you a hand and stand side by side with you.
We've mentioned it over and over again. It wasn't just the ice storm that brought the best out in people, although that certainly did. We've spent a lot of time in and around fire stations with this program, and Calvin has, since he first cranked the camera back in 1982, because it's a very important part of the North Country, and it's the history of fire service here is a part of the history of who we are.
That is correct. Fire service here has been developed because of our community. We have tuned our fire service into helping our community for its essential needs that are here. We now know that with the fire service locally, that we have certain areas which some departments are experts in and some departments aren't. And we do not hesitate to call on those departments that when we need help. And they are tuned and they've developed for our community a specialty. And that's very important.
And I hope we sparked an interest in people studying the history of where they live and where they work, because on the overall scheme of things, I believe we're painting quite a nice picture with this program called Our Little Corner. The program, as our viewers can easily tell, is totally unedited. Whatever we do today on our trip with bells ringing and and people, the mailman coming through the door, that all stays in, but that's part of the charm of it, and it shows people who we are and what we do. Let's take a look at the front of the truck.
All right, we'll go to the
right,
front where
let's do
the
it.
big bucket is.
This gives you an idea about how ready they are. All the gear's all set here, isn't it?
All the gear is all set here. In this back area are usually areas for tailgates, guys that ride the back of the truck. And in the front area of this rack is usually aerial drivers. Guys who will drive this truck, they usually like to have their gear by the door. On the other side, over by the pumper, they have an area for officers and pumper drivers. So everybody's gear is pretty much put on the rack where they're going to be performing their duties from. You come into the department and you get assigned a rack, and that's your rack until you either move up or somebody moves out of another rack and you move to his slot.
Okay, but this truck is ready to go at a moment's notice, isn't it?
Oh, that is correct. As you can see, our driver today has his quick hitches on the floor, and he's ready to roll out the door. Inside, helmet, coat. This apparatus, for the guys who use this, you have to spend well over 30 hours of training to
Do
be
you really?
qualified. Then you have to go through with the assistant chief, and you have to be qualified on the pump and the ladder. And he'll put you through a set of tests, pumping from the tower to pumping off the panel. You'll pull lines. He'll make sure you know what you're doing, and he'll run you almost out of water, and then you have to connect a hydrant to it and fill up what you need. It's really an incredible piece of equipment. With the platform, we can get right up to the building and able to do rescue. We've practiced rescuing out of the college dorms in those windows. We've
Oh, have you
practiced
really?
rescuing off the old barracks on the base. This apparatus is used all summer long for training. It's very important to us. Our junior guys, usually after 2 or 3 years, they become aerial qualified. It's a big standard in this department nowadays to try to qualify everybody on every piece of equipment. But of course, the guys in their first year or two, they got to stick to their schooling as EMTs because your first few years you ride the ambulance. I've been here 7 years. I spent 5.5 years on the ambulance. Firefighters before me, some guys have spent 12 years riding the ambulance. All depends on when you come on and what type of openings are there. But as you can see, as you move up in the years, your training gets more and more intense.
The education never ends, does it?
Never ends. Like we use that classroom this afternoon. Actually, we'll be going through class for a couple hours, doing some studying on probably some building structures.
I want to get up a little closer to the front here with Kelvin and take a look at this platform. This is massive and amazing.
Yes,
Tell me a little more about it.
Well, this platform will hold effectively 2 firefighters on it, possibly 3. You're strapped into a belt, and on the top of the platform there is a box that has hose lines. Now, when we had the fire on Cumberland Avenue, this platform was actively used. We went ahead and we opened the doors. We hooked up to the 2.5-inch lines on the end, and we sent fire crews into the building from the platform onto the second floor to effectively fight fire in an area we just couldn't get to because of the fire. We couldn't contain it in one area. So we went through with the aerial ladder, pushed the fire back into the area that already burned, and we were able to extinguish the fire and have a successful save.
I can remember, you're sparking a lot of my memories. I can remember when the aerial truck first got to town and firefighters were training on it. How all of a sudden a few of the firefighters realized that's a long ways up that cotton picking ladder.
Oh, yes.
And for some of the guys, that's not too easy the first time, is it?
No. Ideal use for this ladder is we like to try to use it at about a 60-degree angle for guys to climb. Anything higher than that, we have to lower and allow that. Because of safety issues and how big the rungs are, it's really hard for firefighters to climb such a big ladder. We've done it at 70-degree angles and so on
kidding.
and so forth, but we really try to stay away from having any part of creating a more dangerous situation. So usually when we get in here, we'll arrive on scene, the guys will go across the ladder, get into the bucket, buckle in, and then they'll operate the apparatus and move it to the position they need to move it to.
And very often when you're up there, you got your gear on, and you may have to rescue people. You may have to bring people out through a dorm window or something, right?
Oh yes, we've practiced doing the rescue ourselves. Through the college, we'll ladder one of the dorms. We'll have the guys go into the window from the bucket and come back out of the window through the bucket. And it's an incredible situation when you're that high up and to see what you're doing. I mean, it's a putter flutter. Your heart's going a little bit, slightest little fall, and you're dropping 80, 90 feet to the ground.
Well, I would like to point out to people that firefighting is a laudable profession. It's also a very credible thing for people to do, to join their volunteer fire departments out in the country, because many people are watching this all over northern New York. It's something that's absolutely necessary. All of us value our lives and our property and those of our pets and our old photographs. You notice that people grab photographs when fires happen.
Oh, yeah.
It's extremely important to issue a salute on our little corner and hometown cable to firefighters everywhere, because it's a job that, as you've already pointed out over and over again, is at times fraught with danger. Try not to think about that, but every time you go into a building, there's a possibility that there's going to be a serious problem. That's why the training is so absolutely essential, and that's why we want give a special salute to firefighters everywhere.
Well, in our communities, the volunteer departments in our surrounding area, God bless them for what they do for their communities. It takes a lot of stamina for these guys to get up in the middle of the night, and they don't have to go and help out and do what they can do for their communities. And I live in a district that has volunteers in it, and God bless them. If there's something wrong, I'm hoping they're coming to my house to take care of the situation.
You know, I live less than 50 feet from the fire station, and my dog, Kia, knows how to sing along with that fire siren very well. Before the siren even goes off, he's in his chair in the window, tuning up with his head toward the sky. And I've always appreciated having the firemen that close. A big part of fire history, and this fire department has been connected with so many wonderful things, has been the games that firemen used to play. Remember all the competitions that they used to have in this county?
Yes, Fireman Field Days. That's really gone astray. You really don't have firefighter field days.
Fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of competition, but a lot of departments in the history that I looked into took them a little too serious, a lot of guys, and it created friction between one department to another because one department did better than the other in this category, and that created a lot of problems in the history of firefighting. But, you know, we're all here, we're all serve the purpose, we're all here for our communities.
I've seen the souped up trucks, I've seen the dummy carrying exercises up the ladders, and as a young person and then as a young reporter in the radio business, I thoroughly enjoyed those, but I can understand where you're right.
Yeah, but I would love to see another firefighter field day come along and have the competitions that we're doing. Peru does a small thing every year during their first weekend in June. They do a little event here and there, but I would like to see a big, huge event among all the fire departments, not dealing with modern day firefighting, but the old bucket brigades or crazy little things going on.
See where you're coming from.
Here. Instead of today's traditional, which has a lot of stuff to it. Instead, let's go back and do some of the stuff from the early 1900s and make it fun. Instead of a competitive nature, make it a fun nature. That would be a phenomenal thing to do.
Yeah, that's your project, should you choose to accept it. Maybe by the next time we do a program, you'll set something like that up. It is wonderful. We're so impressed. You said there's something else that we didn't see, another room? Did you say a front office or a front? No. We've seen all the equipment in here,
We've seen all the equipment.
Okay. We've seen most of the building.
We see most of the building. The only thing left was the EMS office, which is just a small office where our EMTs do their paperwork. Pretty much you have all the rest of the building. When we were in the doorway, we had the captain's office when the mailman came in and bumped us.
Well, I must say, this has been a liberal education for me, and I hope for the rest of our viewers. Again, our original plan was to do the whole thing in one fell swoop. but we're not going to do it that way. I have a feeling it's going to take at least 2 chapters and possibly 3, and I hope that we've whetted our viewers' appetites to getting inside that museum, because it's something I wanted to do for a long, long time. That'll be great. We'll go to Fire Station number 2 on South Platte Street. It's been an institution up there for how long?
Fire Station 2 has been there since the 50s. And it's a great station. It houses 2 pumpers. One similar to here, 283. That one is 284, but there's some differences. That's mainly for rescue and as well as firefighting. And usually it's a crew of 3 to 4 firefighters up there, and it's a nice little station to live at. I was there for 2 years of my career and absolutely loved being up there, but
You're on Fox Hill. You can't go all wrong when you're on Fox Hill.
oh, no. And actually, a little tidbit of information, engine 284 up there, we call Station 2 the Hill because of Fox Hill.
course.
In New York City, engine 284 is also called On the Hill.
You gotta be kidding.
No, they our guys
Is that a
came back
wild
about,
and wonderful coincidence?
about 10 years ago. They came back and gave us that information that 284 is on the hill at Station 2 in New York City.
That's neat. Brian's got at least 600 more pages of history to talk about. He was worried about remembering it all, but I think the conversation flowed very well, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Brian B. Shore, thanks so much for inviting us here
No
today.
problem, Gordy. Thank
Thanks
you
to
very
Chief
much.
Jim Squires and all the other guys that work in this department. Just a fantastic group of people with their families, and the history of the department, which is still unfolding as young guys whose fathers and sometimes their grandfathers
Correct.
were involved in firefighting in the city of Plattsburgh. I think it's so wonderful. I don't know how soon it'll be before you'll see Chapter 2, but if you're a regular viewer of our little corner, stick with it, because we'll be back again. Reporting from Fire Station number 1 on Cornelia Street in Plattsburgh, Gordy Little and Calvin Castine for Hometown Cable. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.